Hi, welcome to the PERSUIT podcast, where we discuss all innovation and issues across the legal landscape. I am your host today for this one, Jordan Weinstein. I'm the VP of Data and Growth at PERSUIT. And today my guest is Chris Grant. I think your title is currently Managing Director of Client Value at Goodwin. Is that right?
It is indeed. It is indeed.
I'll let you introduce yourself really quickly. I'm super excited to have you here because of everyone else, and sorry for everyone else in the future, but you're in a unique position, right? You've had a very unique sort of journey here, which I'd love for you to kind of give us a quick overview of that and introduce yourself in terms of your current role as well.
Of course, more than happy to, and it has been a strange journey. I started out in a law firm many years ago, frustrated by not being able to do things more efficiently because everybody was, well, why would you do it quicker? We're billing by the hour. Why would you do that? Which ultimately pushed me in a different direction. So I ended up moving to in-house legal teams and spending a lot of time in legal operations, where it was all actually, how can we do more with less? Because I was in a bank, so it wasn't just do more with less, it was do even more with even less on repeat. And it just kept on iterating cycle after cycle. So it's been probably, I don't want to count the years, but a lot of years of that journey focused on legal operations, thinking about how we could drive down our internal costs and be more effective and more efficient as an in-house team, which very quickly also then starts to look at the external side of things, because the cost of legal is just not the bums that you have on seats within your legal team. So latterly, and probably the last 10 or so years, it's been focused on how to manage our law firms and how to get a better deal with them. It's not necessarily about squeezing every last dollar from them. I think we've done a good job of that. And there's only so much you can squeeze before it starts to hurt. So it was looking at different ways of doing things. So having spent then plenty of time talking about how to price differently, how to change that engagement, and try to drive that change from within an in-house team, from the client side, I've now decided it would be a good idea to go into a law firm and see if we can make that change happen. And I've got to say, Goodwin is probably one of the only firms that I think could do that. And that I'm very excited to have kind of jumped ship and gone on the other side. I don't know whether I'm gamekeeper, poacher, whatever I'm doing, there's something going on, but definitely trying to make change still happen. So it's a small army of us trying to change the legal industry, and that's what I'm trying to do. And there's also the sideline of being the person that chews your ear off from a PERSUIT perspective in terms of what I wanted from the client side to know what I want from the law firm side. So that's my hobby.
How long have you been at Goodwin now?
I've just hit 3 months, actually.
3 months, all right.
Just hit a 3-month mark.
So now they've got to keep you really for a little longer. Yeah. I mean, got past that probation period.
I'll stay.
Well, I mean, for me, it's kind of interesting, and hopefully we don't get too much into groupthink here, because we both had somewhat of a similar journey. I started out in law firms as well, hating that sort of conflict of being a technologist, wanted to do things faster and cheaper, and, aging partners saying, well, hang on, I just want to bill 500 hours for the same thing. And so then I also went into in-house and into FinServ as well. I did not go back to a law firm though, like you. And so that's, it's interesting, right? Because you had that thing that you didn't love at law firms a long time ago, but you had decided to come back. Now being there 3 months or so, I feel like a lot of times we often make assumptions about what things are like on the other side. Are there things that you have sort of rediscovered that do still exist and confirm those assumptions, or actually, no, that's not so true anymore, or hasn't been true for a while, that you've noticed?
I mean, look, I never thought I'd do this. I didn't see myself ever moving back into a law firm again. So it has been a bit of a journey, and there's been lots to kind of surprise me. I think as I made that move back into a firm, I was expecting there to be a lot more inertia, right? With that's what I was used to from the past, in terms of just that bit of, this is just the way we do things, so that's the way we're going to carry on doing things. And I think that then becomes the biggest surprise, certainly at Goodwin, in that is not the case. Time and time again, I have conversations with our partners who are all focused on how do we do things in a different way? How do we think about structuring ourselves in a different way to do things in a different with a different focus, right? It is being able to deliver to the client in a different way, taking on board more of the client's needs and requirements, and therefore being really focused on it. So I've had less conversation about why we need to change, that less challenging conversations. Everything has been, well, we need to move forward. We understand that. We just don't quite know how to. But also the real surprise has been the number of ideas that have been put on the table. So I've had a number of kind of amazing presentations from partners with ideas on what they could do to restructure the way that they provide their services or the way that they price for their services, which I really didn't expect. Even the use of Excel, right? I've long stood up on stages and said if lawyers like numbers, they'd be accountants. And here I've got Excel with VLOOKUP and all sorts of things going on. So certainly have been impressed by that.
So yeah, that's great. I mean, certainly I think for me, that's a sign of change. I mean, I can think back to my almost 20 years at law firms and think that it's kind of rare to hear partners come to the table with technology-minded people saying, "Hey, how can we do this differently?" I feel like that's not a thing that you used to hear that often. So that's kind of fantastic. When in those conversations or maybe tangentially is, you talk about pricing. Obviously, you've been in a very, very much sort of pricing heavy roles. I'd say. How much are AFAs coming up? How much are you yelling at them, telling them they should be called EFAs? And I also want to uncover, when you say we, have you now been at the law firm long enough, or are you like full on having a bipolar disorder where you don't know what side you're sitting on?
Lots in there to unravel. I definitely have bipolar. I feel like I should have two hats, because there's a voice in me that very much talks from the client perspective still, and then there's this new law firm one that I shall see people looking at me sometime, saying, "What is it you're talking about now?" And I'm like, "Okay, I'm talking as a client." So yeah, there's definitely a bit of a challenge there. AFAs, EFAs, and look, I think just so that everybody is on the same page with what an EFA is. We know alternate fee arrangements, EFA, more effective fee arrangements.
Did you coin that one, by the way?
Yes.
Do you want to trademark? Okay. Yeah.
It's absolutely mine. Every time it's mentioned, there's another dollar goes into my bank account.
Nice.
So
Residuals,
let's say EFAs all the way through. So it was a drive, certainly from my previous organization, to acknowledge that, we really wanted to move the needle. I had an amazing GC who is still there, or chief legal officer, who is very focused on driving things in a different way. And this whole debate around hourly rates and the alternative fee arrangements that can go with them, he wanted to just kill it once and for all. So the reason we moved to these more effective fee arrangements was taking us away from anything that had the hourly rate baked in at the back end of it. So anything on a capped fee, it's still talking about the hourly rate. We want to drive that change. So that's where we made a separation between alternative fee arrangement and more effective fee arrangements. And it's more than just actually the arrangement at the outset. We've kind of defined EFAs in terms of being a lot more collaborative. So we understand that you need to have that backwards forwards dialogue between law firm and client to understand what it is we're pricing for, what you want to get out the other side of it, so the output, and therefore coming up with the number. It's then also actively managing that number. So it doesn't mean that once we've agreed it, we never talk about it again. It's having that continual dialogue. So if things do change, we address it at the time, ultimately making sure that we're keeping certainty around those numbers. Now, do I think we're there with EFAs or even AFAs? We're definitely at a tipping point, right? And I think that's the bit that I have learned more moving to a law firm. My laser focus up until now has very much been from the client perspective, working with a very sophisticated buyer of legal services. And that is not every client in the market. There is certainly a big gap, and there's certainly a range across the different financial services businesses as well. And they're not all on the same page. We're pushing in the right direction, but I don't think we've kind of achieved that momentum to have done it across the board. So we're at a bit of a tipping point. I think people are more aligned to getting cost certain, and that's what it is, right? That's why we want to do more effective fee arrangements. It's so we can get cost certainty. It's so we've got
hang on.
What we're doing.
Who's we?
I'm back to the we again. both sides, right? I think we is collectively, right? So the benefit for the client is that when we're running our budgets and we're responding to the CFO, who is our biggest challenger, right? That's the conversation that the chief legal officer needs to have on a regular basis. How are you managing your budget?
Right.
It's
So that's
very
the cost
hard to
certainty for
manage.
the client. Yeah.
Totally. Cost certainty for the client, because you can't manage your budget if you've just got, my favorite analogy, a load of taxis running across London, New York with just meters running, right? That's not the right scenario. And on the law firm side, again, cost certainty, because we know what we're going to get. It's revenue certainty.
Sure.
Right? We're starting to lock in what we're getting. There's no more conversation around write-offs. We're just dealing with actual real numbers, which is helpful for us as well. So cost certainty, that's probably the one time when we is the right phrase to use.
Yeah.
Because it does sit across both of us.
Yeah. And I guess, what's your reasoning or what's your thinking around, we're at a tipping point. Why hasn't it tipped over? Why hasn't it fallen over? And why isn't it 80% of legal spend in the industry is on an EFA or AFA versus, what it is today, which is really on the, 80% on the hourly rates. Is it, more around, and I hear I think there's a lot of assumptions happening, right? Certainly assumptions on both sides, but I think a lot on the law firm side, which is an assumption that the client isn't ready. And I mean that in a vague sense. And I'm curious if you have a view of what does that mean? Is that, they're not ready because they're not comfortable with it. They're not comfortable in terms of sharing risk, or that they're going to get that cost certainty. Or is it, more operational and tactically, they don't have the systems in place. They don't know how to do it, or how to do it well, per se.
I think it's a combination of all of those. And I think anybody listening to this, there'll be different things that resonate for them, depending on where they are in their journey. I think there is a big bit of clients definitely not being ready. There's also a bit of law firms not being ready, because the conversation I have a lot is, and this is on both sides, well, if we're not doing it by the hour, then how are we doing it? Right? We're keen to move to a different way, but what is the kind of formula that we then need to start to use coming forward? And certainly in my time at HSBC, a lot was spent educating people, both on the law firm side as well as our lawyers, as to, well, what is the alternative and how do you get comfortable with that? We're unpicking hundreds of years of the way that things have been built. So how do you start to do that? And I think on the client side, it's a comfort, because we know what we're doing with ours. It helps us to feel like we have control over the costs, because when those bills come in, the sport starts, right? The game starts of going through those invoices and those line items and taking things out.
People love that, don't they?
Love it, right? It's a satisfying thing, because you've got something tangible to say, and I've knocked X amount off the bill. I have saved us, therefore, a certain amount of money. So we still cling to them as the main tool that we need to use. But we're getting it confused, because what we want to talk about is effort, and that the two are kind of linked in terms of, if we're going to price for an alternative fee arrangement, then we need to look at the effort that goes into getting the work done. That still means a bit of a conversation around hours, but it doesn't mean pricing by the hours, right? Thinking about how to do things in a different way. There's always that fear of overpaying, not getting the right deal. And that, again, that's that client mindset. They are playing with their organization's money. And it's a bit of, there's two things that we now have to do. You used to just have to manage the legal risk, but you now also have to manage the legal budget, right? That is very much at the forefront. If you're in any business, costs is a big conversation. So you've got to kind of do the two, and you're always going to worry, particularly on a big bet the bank type or bet the client type scenario. You want to make sure that you're getting the right and the best possible advice for that deal. So the two need to be separated a little bit more. There's also not the right tools, as you said, right? Even my journey, and we were at 80% of our spend being on more effective fee arrangements, I didn't have the tools to necessarily easily check all of that, right? We've not connected the whole front to back process so that we can arrange an alternative fee arrangement or an effective fee arrangement. But are we checking that that's what we're paying at the other side of it, right? The tools don't always sync up to be able to do that. And there's a big bit of building trust on both sides, because there's always going to be winners and losers when it comes to alternative fee arrangements until we get smarter around doing them. And build on the experience of putting these arrangements in place, we may get some of that wrong. Like there's sometimes the client wins, sometimes the law firm wins, but on the whole, we should get a bit of a balance. But we need to build up trust in each other. And that's, again, that kind of fallback from the client perspective where, yes, we'll do alternative fee arrangements, but can you also shadow bill so we can see what's going on in the background? So that fundamentally also doesn't build the trust. So until some of those things stop, we're going to have challenges. And I think there's also those assumptions that are being made. You know, client always assumes that they can just keep on writing these off and asking things to be written off without there being consequences. It's eating into the firm's margins, right? That fundamentally can only last for so long, and you can only do that for so long. You want that firm to still be there. You want it to still have the great teams. You want to have the A team deployed on your work. If you
you want them to come to work for you,
Totally. If you keep on eroding on that margin, it just becomes more and more challenging, and we need to take a step away from that, which the best way of doing that is moving away from hours and talking more about the entire package and how we start to price things. And I think there's the same assumption made from a law firm side that they assume that all we really care about is price. Again, another hat on. Here we go with a we. But, you know, from a client perspective, that law firm perspective, looking at a client, just trying to drive the bottom line and get this as cheaply as we possibly can. There's more to it than that, right? It's also that predictability. It's the speed of being able to get that transaction done. It's an element of risk sharing. There's much more that plays a part in that. So it's kind of those assumptions that we need to get eradicated, but we'll only do that by having more conversations. And to have more conversations, we need to trust each other a little bit more. So kind of boils itself back down to that. So it's, you know, I think I spent in all of my roles previously a lot of time building up that relationship, and that's the bit that we need to focus on, right? That relationship is actually the product, and that's got a value to it as well.
Yeah. You know, so that's an interesting part of what I watched your career trajectory include, which mine didn't. Right, I was much more on the technology side. I was not in the room for sort of relationship meetings, QB quarterly business reviews. Neither on the law firm side nor when I was on the client. I always thought it was pretty fascinating that you were, and you know, you would come to the US and say, "Hey, Jordan, I'm going to be in town. I'm having 14 meetings with law firms." And then recently, you know, PERSUIT had a webinar where we brought in someone from a law firm who talked about sort of how they sort of use PERSUIT in the best way. And you thought it was interesting that you, having been at Barclays and HSBC, had never met that person, right? And that was effectively like a business development type role of a person. And you're like, I would have been great to have been able to meet that person in working with that law firm. Yet you've been able to get yourself in the room. Can you talk about sort of, you know, one sort of how did you get yourself in the room? And why do you think, and what's interesting is you've gotten yourself in the room on the client side. Sounds like you're going to start to do the same on the law firm side. I would say in general, on the law firm side, that doesn't happen, right? You don't get non-lawyers in the room with clients generally, unless it's like to fix their laptop, you know, right? So I don't how'd you do that? And why don't you think it happens more?
Oh, look, I love this as a topic for discussion, and this could be a podcast all on its own, but it is that important part. And I think it took a long time to get there from the banking perspective. And I remember the kind of early days of us putting in relationship meetings. Look, I sat on the original relationship meetings as they were, and it was a lot of amazing people around a room patting each other on the back about what a great job they've done over the course of the last year, and then talking a little bit about where they're going to go for dinner later, right? It was a good conversation, but it didn't tackle any of the things that we needed to be able to improve. I mean, those should be almost retrospectives on performance, right? As we all do. If I'm going to put a quarterly relationship meeting in, we should be talking more about what's not working than we are about the stuff that is working, so that we can help to improve. So having watched a few of those, then resetting the dial and putting in place new structures for relationship meetings. And you know, I was working with Stephanie Hamon at the time, and also coming in with great ideas about how we could do things in different ways. It was a real moment of clear the decks, let's reset, and this is the way things are going to run. And I remember after the first few of those relationships meetings that we did, law firms coming back out and talking to their normal contacts within the banks and going, well, we didn't like that. Is this going to continue? And it took a few runs before we kind of got buy-in to those meetings. And even then, there was law firms that likened them to a trip to the dentist. Was a relationship meeting because it was painful, and quite rightly so. We were talking about the uncomfortable things, and we're in a great position to do that because I'm not picking up the phone to do a new matter the next day or continue working with them at the same time. So it was something that we slowly chipped away at, and by bringing information to the table and starting to share things that law firms wanted to hear, we shifted the dynamic. So, for example, we started to give information about share of wallet, right? Here is our total spend. This is what you are getting in terms of that total spend. These are the areas that we think are going to reduce. This is what's going to increase. Information that is not normally put on the table, or certainly wasn't put on the table back then, started to get a bit more buy-in. And as we did additional things like putting net promoter scores in to talk about how law firms were performing, it became more interesting, I think, for the firms to come into the room. We've had to create a forum where it was and now we want you to bring somebody else in. So we did deep dives into things like innovation or pricing, and said, bring in everybody that is involved in this process and let's have a conversation with them. And it was hit and miss. Some got it, right? And we met some of the most amazing people that were able to help us drive a change, certainly around legal project management. As we did deep dives into LPM and how that worked, we saw firms that were just floundering and others that really had an awesome program that we could help to partner on. On the pricing side, we got to see the pricing directors, we got to see the people that were managing the tenders. Sometimes we didn't. And like I said, that you mentioned at the kind of intro to this question, it's a real shame that we didn't see more of those people, because that would have just elevated the conversation and given more opportunities for more work, because we want to test things out with all of these people so that we can learn from them. The flip side of that is now I'm back into the law firm, and you would think that it would be more challenging to have some of those conversations on the client side. And we've also got, where I am now, we've got an excellent BD team, and we've got various other different people turning the wheels, right? There's different cogs that are all turning, that all play to the right relationship piece. I'm 3 months in. I've already started to have conversations with the client, and it is connecting the right people. And you can see it. For me, it seems so obvious where a conversation is being had, and that conversation is about rates. And it will be the client relationship partner, and it will be the lawyer within the organization. And it's a tense conversation, right? It's always a tense conversation talking about rates and trying to negotiate around the kind of increases. Short-circuiting that process, and our lawyers love it, right, is being able to go into that room and go, who's their COO? Can we have a little chat with the COO and just find out what their ambitions are? Because if they want to actually move away from the hourly rate, let's start talking about it and see if there's another proposal that we can put on the table. And that's gaining traction. And don't get me wrong, some of those clients are going, no, you're fine. I just want to talk about hourly rates. And I kind of go, okay, we'll be back to have that conversation. I feel like Arnold Schwarzenegger a lot in some of these like kind of Terminator. It's always I'll be back. But there's a real willingness to bring alternative people into these different people into the conversations, and we should have them. We should have people on the BD side of things. We should have finance. We should have legal operations on the client side coming in to have those conversations. We should have the pricing people sitting at the table. I'm definitely feeling that where I am now, and we're leveraging on those. Those conversations are going really well. It's a start of a journey, but helps us to, particularly if we want to move to a different way of pricing, it's the right people to have those conversations with. But it's not easy.
Yeah. No, I love that. You touched on something there that I want to come back to. You mentioned at HSBC, one of the things you did to sort of change what those meetings looked like was bring more information to it. I don't know if I've told you this, but I'll flatter you here if you haven't heard this. My view has been for a long time that what you did, and part of this will be about PERSUIT, right? I'm just going to make an assumption. You're a pretty big fan of PERSUIT at HSBC. I think the way that you used it was actually exceptional. It was a model for other clients to try to mimic. And a lot of that for me comes down to how transparent you decided to be. And obviously you had to do some convincing at the bank to say, hey, you know what? Let's share our share of wallet with these firms and talk to, hey, we're going to go into a meeting with law firm X, and we can tell them, you know what? You got invited to 20% of the value of all the matters on pursuits. Let's talk about the 80% that you didn't get invited to or didn't win and why. And for me, that's rare. And I think it's actually wonderful. I'd love to hear a bit about how you convinced people at HSBC to be okay with that, because it's not common.
Yeah. But and thank you for that. I mean, it's definitely, we've been on a journey. We've definitely been on a journey together, and there is so much. I mean, it boils down to me, data is power, right? That is the piece that gives us all the right, make sure that we have all the right conversations. And it was a shift at HSBC, but actually we'd been given that mandate to go out and have the right conversations, whatever that then looked like. And there's always that bit of, beg for forgiveness.
Sure.
And let's just see where we go. I mean,
So you took a bit of a risk.
Took a bit of a risk, right?
Yeah,
and I think in everything that we're doing, be that on the law firm side or on the client side, everything is about taking a bit of a risk. At some point it's we remove billable targets. At some point it's we remove the billable hour. At HSBC, we just removed rate cards for a number of our firms. What's the worst that could happen? Right? If we're focusing on costs still, and in fact you focus even more on it if you remove the rate cards, it gives you that opportunity to be more laser focused on it anyway. So it is taking a bit of a risk, but it is also, as always, showing the benefit that is driven by doing this. So for our in-house teams, they stop getting asked the questions or getting that pressure from the firms around, well, we're not getting invited, we're not winning, you just keep on inviting as nothing happens out the other side. Suddenly you can put the data back that goes, actually, well, you're getting invited more than anybody else. So mind your neck in, right? It puts the right context around things. So that just, it helps to shift the conversation in a different direction. And for us, it is that bit of sitting in a relationship meeting where it is the moaning of, well, we're not winning this, we're not winning that. You just keep on giving it to the lowest bidder, right? And I would have put a pin in reverse auctions for another other favorite topic of conversation where we do definitely butt heads on. But it's that we can then turn around and go, we don't, right? And actually, you can see
here's the data,
the percentage. This is actually what is happening on the platform. And what you need to worry about more is all the other firms that we're inviting to tender, and stop focusing on the ones that you think are in the mix, right? Actually having some more transparency. And we'd spoken about how can we get these dashboards in the hands, or this information in the hands of the law firms. And I remember that conversation where I'd come back after a round of relationship meetings, and again I was coming to moan in your ear going, why have we not got law firms access to the other side of the system so they can see it? And your answer was a very quick, well, they do, and they've all got, and here's all their accounts, and this is what they can see. They just don't want to go in and find it, or know how to go in and find it, or whatever their excuses were. But I think if we're going to move forward and we're going to get to the right outcomes and we're going to get to the right position, the more open and transparent we can be, the better. And data should help to inform our decisions going forward anyway. So let's use it to its full potential.
Yeah, no, all makes sense. So flipping that script a bit, right? I'll say you were a big fan of PERSUIT at HSBC. Now, 3 months into the law firm, I'm curious, do you see that changing? And I know this isn't part of our document that we prepared ahead of time.
No, it's a good question.
I'm throwing you a curveball.
Oh, hey, look, I've sat and cursed you, specifically you. Yeah. It's not fun, right? It is not fun being on the other side of it. And again, actually, where it becomes not fun is when the transparency reduces, because that's when you feel like there is gamification, certainly sitting on the other side of it, right? And you feel like you're being played, and that is not the happiest place to be in. It has become what it was a tool for gathering data for me, right? And making sure that I could focus on the right outcomes. If I'm going to move away from managing rates every 3 years and allowing rate increases, I need to focus on what I'm paying each and every single time I instruct. And that's what the tool was, right? That's where we bonded. That's where it really worked for me. It helped me to drive that change forward and became the tool that would allow that to happen. Now it's a torture device. I'm literally sat on the other side and I feel the pain. I've sat and I've watched, and it is the reverse auctions that cause me the most pain, and it's the reverse auctions that cause me the most pain when the information is not transparent.
Right.
And I'm just seeing where the firm is being ranked. We're not getting the greatest of scopes coming through, and that's something we've been talking about before. How do we improve around doing those? And that's not something we just do on our own. That's more of a collaborative conversation. It just, there's more that we can be doing with it, but therefore it's meant that our conversation has changed.
Yeah.
And we're now talking about what that needs to look like from a law firm perspective. It should and could, and it is becoming a tool for us for good as well on the law firm side, because we're starting to get more visibility, transparency. It is giving us data, and there's a long way to go, right? We know that we've got a lot to get that data into a way that we can really effectively use it, because we all look at things in different ways and interrogate it in different ways and have different questions and therefore get different answers. But it is giving us exposure to the other side of the curtain, which helps to have, if you're in the right relationship with your client, it helps you to have the right conversation. So we're on another journey in terms of our relationship. We're dating again.
No, honestly, and I honestly, I think and maybe this is a good place to close. I think, like, you and I and whoever else we can pull along with us, we need to help convince more clients to be more transparent, open up more of that curtain the way that you did at HSBC. Yeah. Honestly, like that's a mission that I'm on. Because I think, because for this to work, it has to add value to both sides. Yeah. In the long run.
If we're going to get to a position where we no longer talk about the hourly rate and we do focus on output pricing, and we get alternative fee arrangements and effective fee arrangements on the table, that's only going to happen if we collaborate, and it's only going to happen if we are talking from the same perspective. And helping us to do that is the information that we can then start to use to push that dialogue forward.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks very much, Chris. It's been a pleasure. Thanks also for coming on site. We have our lovely PERSUIT offices behind you. A link to Chris'
Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Will be in the description. And that's all I've got for you today. Thanks again.